Hello. Hello. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight. This is the third week of Assembly Online line now, on behalf of the Assembly House Trust. Tonight we have HomeSounds, which is a project created by Recast Music Education. There will be a short introduction, followed by a live sound um, feed that will be explained in the introduction. And that will be for around 20 minutes, followed by a performance by Oliver Payne, and ending with a discussion between Martin Scaife and Oliver Payne. I'll be back at the end, but without taking up more of your time, I'll let Martin explain it from here. I'm just going to add him in from a Zoom call, and it should work.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Aha. Good evening. I hope everyone can hear me okay. And I hope this evening finds you well and healthy at this strange time. Thanks very much for joining us tonight. And thanks to Assembly Online and to Henry for inviting us to be involved this evening. And we've overcome the technical challenge, yeah, I hope you enjoy it. My name is Martin. I'm the director of Recast Music Education. We're a Norfolk-based education organisation, and we work with young people, but particularly young people in complicated or challenging circumstances. We work primarily with music and sound, and increasingly over the last few years with environmental sound. The HomeSounds project, we're going to talk more about HomeSounds at the end of tonight's event, but just to give you an introduction, it's a strand of our work that where we take young people out sound walking. We do listening activities. We talk to them about the science of sound, the technology of recording, and acoustic ecology. And we do all of this with the express aim of encouraging them to become to take their listening seriously, and to become active listeners, active participants in their acoustic habitats wherever they may be. And we do that for a number of reasons, but primarily it's for educational purposes. It's for kind of creative purposes, using sound in the many creative ways you can, and also for therapeutic purposes, which is part of the theme of tonight's event. We work with some young people that will gain a lot and do gain a lot from being given the opportunity to spend quiet time listening, and we hope they will what we do with them will encourage them to take their listening and their environments, their acoustic environments, more seriously, in terms of impacting on all the different areas, which again we're going to talk about in the discussion at the end of tonight's performance. So the rough plan for tonight is, it's not a rough plan, it's the plan, we're going to tune into one of the live streams of from these live streaming microphones that, as part of the project, we've installed around Norfolk. So we work with various partners, including the Norwich Science Festival, and Mancraft Advice Project, and a number of schools, and many others locally, As part of that, the project with the Science Festival, we installed 3 microphones, one at RSPB Titchwell, which if you're not from Norfolk, you won't know, but it's uh, an internationally known bird reserve on the North Norfolk coast. We have a mic at a place called Sheringham Park, which is a 1,000-acre woodland, and run by the National Trust, which is like a heritage organisation in the UK. And then we have one at a place called Grimes Graves, which is a prehistoric flint mine. It's about 5,000 years old. And we have a microphone there, and we installed those microphones in partnership with the young people. And we also ran a load of listening activities and sound walks connected with the microphones where we installed them. And so what we're going to do this evening is tune into, we're going to, essentially what we wanted to do was run a sound walk as best as we can, particularly knowing that people can't get out to those kinds of places, and allow everyone the opportunity to spend some time just listening to a new environment or a natural soundscape. The mic we're going to tonight is RSPB Titchwell Marsh, and it's a coastal reserve, so it's a mix of saltwater marsh, freshwater lagoons, and a tidal marsh, and it's extremely busy in bird life at the moment. We're gonna visit that mic and spend about 20 minutes listening to that. So when that starts, I'd like to encourage you to get into a place where you can concentrate exclusively on the stream, and then as that Oliver Payne is going to reimagine the soundscape for the second half of tonight's performance, and then following that there'll be a discussion between Oliver and myself on the work that I do and the work that he does, and he'll tell you more about his work later on too. So that's the plan. As HomeSounds is an educational project, we want to invite you to kind of contribute to that educational effort, and we've created a kind of a space for tonight's event in a Google Classroom. If you want to take part in that event, in those activities, we've got 3 questions in there and a guide to tonight's performance with more information about how to listen and where to get involved. And if you want to take part, there is a link to the Google Classroom, and you need a class code. Unfortunately, you need to have a Google account in order to access it. But if anyone's interested in getting all the links and the materials, happy to share them with you if you mention it in the chat window or stick around. We were going to open up for after the whole event tonight, me and Oliver were going to open up the Google Meet for anybody else who wanted to continue the discussion in any way, so we can share those resources with you. Without I think that's a good introduction to get started with. And So the first place we're going to go to RSPB Titchwell. So this is live. It's a live stream. And if you have any questions, if any questions come to you during the course of the evening, post them in the chat window and we'll incorporate them. Oliver and I will incorporate them into our discussion at the end. Yeah, so I want to invite you to come and tune in. Titchwell Marsh.
Cool. Hello, I'm Oliver. That was some music that I just made with my computer. I was using the Titchwell stream there to go through a series of processing chains, and then also used as an amplitude gate to trigger synthesized sounds. And I'm just going to talk about myself very quickly. I'm a sound artist that uses sculpture and recorded audio in installation, having had an interest in exploring environmental sounds and extended field recording techniques. I'm a founder of Eastern Ear, formerly the Norfolk Norwich Sonic Arts Collective, an organisation dedicated to producing a range of activity around improvise and use new music, including the fortnightly improvising ensemble workshop The Plank, a series of live events as Plink Plonk, and bespoke partnership projects used in the form of workshops with partners like the Norfolk Norwich Festival and the Norfolk Music Hub. We are co-creators of Yarmonics, which is Great Yarmouth first and possibly only festival of sonic art and new music with our friends. Original projects. I'm the program manager of the Norwich-based disability arts charity Musical Keys, and was recently made non-executive director of Recast Music Education, which is how we've ended up producing tonight's event. We decided for me to do a performance because what I do in terms of music making is kind of related to what HomeSounds do in terms of their core activities. So I've been making experimental music for many years, but in the last 7 or 8, my work has ventured into kinetic sculpture and installation, and I've come to understand that the stuff I make is as much about listening than sounding, than making sound. And most of the time, the work I end up making is a result of spending lots of time observing a place, a process, or a thing by listening to it as an attempt to kind of investigate by durational observation. I've also had periods of mental ill health and have used listening as a way of kind of managing that by taking myself to places like the seaside or the woods to focus on basic senses, hearing. I don't like to use the term mindfulness because there's no attempt to reach any sort of spiritual insight, but to simply focus on something that I enjoy and that brings me happiness. And so that is also fed into the sort of sound work I make, which is often simple, repetitive, and invites the listener to slow down, I think. So Martin talked previously about the work of HomeSounds and the fact that sound walks were a kind of central part of that activity with HomeSounds work with young people. So I thought it'd be a good idea to talk about what sound walks are for anyone that's not come across the term. A sound walk is a walk with a focus on listening to the environment. The term was first coined by members of the World Soundscape Project early in the 1970s, and the two artists that are attributed with creating sound walks as a kind of formal popular practices are Raymond Schaefer and Hildegard Westerkamp. Westerkamp is a founder of the World Forum for Acoustic Ecology and continues to produce really excellent work around acoustic ecology and listening. And I've got a thing here, her description of sound walking in the context of her own practice, which is any excursion whose main purpose is listening to the environment. It is an exploration of our ear and environment relationship, unmediated by microphones, headphones, and recording equipment. It is an exploration of what the naked ear hears now and how we relate to it and react to it. Such a sound walk can be done as a regular practice in a group or alone. Invariably, in my experience, its effects on the participating listener are immediate. Whether a walk is done for the first time or the listener is a veteran sound walker, it opens ears to the sounding details of place, and listeners notice the unique soundscape characteristics of a location. Aside from heightening oral perception, a sound walk also alerts all other senses. Sound walking reveals the environment to the listener and opens inner space for noticing. So to delve further into the idea of sound walking and listening as a method of managing and perhaps improving well-being and getting a greater engagement with the natural environment, reflecting on the context of HomeSounds and the event this evening. There's lots of research and evidence which can be found in the classroom link, I think, to papers that have very clearly evidenced the relationship between listening, acoustic ecology, and improved well-being. But there's a very simple description which I found earlier from an artist called Rebecca Ulias, whilst talking about another piece of work by an artist called Andrea Williams, a piece of work she made for the Hudson River in New York, which is Williams walks encourage a participant to swing mental gears away from the frenzied and overstimulated mindset through which we usually unconsciously experience our sensory environments, and towards one of mindful and deep consideration of one's surroundings, almost akin to a sort of meditation experience. Even the most mundane of urban settings, such as a busy city street, is transformed for the participant into an atmosphere ripe with information that allows for further reflection and connection. The walks often go beyond neutral sensory experience and morph into one which Williams uses the intimate connections that the participant has just made with their surroundings in order to address environmental concerns. The participant is at once presented with the setting and the facts in a way that aims to strike them in a greater sense of empathy towards the space and bring to light the various impacts that human activities have had on this environment. Something that also sets the context of what we're talking about tonight and HomeSounds in general is the idea of audio sensory gating, which is the idea that us as humans, the brain has figured out a way of filtering, of gating lots and lots of auditory data, things that we hear all the time that our brain deems unnecessary to kind of function. The technical description is just so sensory gating describes neurological processes filtering out redundant or necessary stimuli in the brain from all possible environmental stimuli. Also referred to as gating or filtering, sensory gating prevents an overload of irrelevant information in the higher cortical centers of the brain. So our brains are not passive recorders or perceivers, but actively construct perceptual experience in an adaptive process. So our brain is deliberately filtering out lots of stuff that we hear so we don't hear it. It's very difficult to kind of quantify how much auditory information our brains makes us forget about, but we know that it's kind of a significant amount. And so even as someone new to sound walks or focused listening, just focusing on one of the live streams or even a standard street, you are met with surprise at the amount of detail in the sonic world around us if you just listen. The other thing I wanted to talk about is kind of to do with sound walks and listening in contemporary arts practice, and talk very quickly about Pauline Oliveros, who coined the term deep listening. So Pauline Oliveros was a composer, an accordionist, and a central figure in the development of avant-garde and early electronic music. And in 1988, coined the term deep listening. And she did so via an experience in a cistern, a massive water tank in Washington State, in the middle of nowhere in Washington. A huge, expansive space which had a 45-second delay, and her and two of her collaborators went into the space and made some music, did some improvising using the 45-second delay as an instrument, as an extra player. So they had no choice other than to kind of respond to and include the sounds that were being made by the space. And there's a quote here. So Oliver states, listening has very little definition compared to hearing. Though the two words are often used interchangeably, their meanings are different. To hear is the physical means that enables perception. To listen is to give attention to what's perceived both acoustically and psychologically. Deep listening is the practice that is about learning to expand the perception of sounds to include the whole space-time continuum of sound encountering, the vastness and complexities as much as possible. Sometimes what is heard is interpreted milliseconds afterwards, or sometimes years later. And whilst reading about Oliveras earlier today, I found a review or kind of an article about Jonathan Willowgibb for Pitchfork magazine, about how Oliveras's ideas about deep listening are kind of as prominent and prevalent now as they were in the 80s, which is summed up nicely in this extract here. Deep listening remains vital, largely because it embodies Oliveras's ideas, which have themselves resurfaced as a corrective to the sinister undercurrents of social and technological advancement. If art is a way to grapple with the philosophical and societal hardships, deep listening may resound with just as much, if not more, clarity now than when it was created. And I think that kind of leads us into the work of HomeSounds and the idea of listening and engaging in acoustic ecology as being a vital part of just kind of being a healthy human being. And so, Martin, I wondered if this is a good point for you to talk a bit more about HomeSounds.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Oliver. So much to say. I thought I'd give a little bit of background to the HomeSounds project, mainly because hopefully some themes will come out of that, drawing on what Oliver's just talked about, and then maybe discuss some of those things in a bit more detail. So HomeSounds is a sort of an element within a wider program which Recast Music Education are developing, which is a program of advocacy or creative-based advocacy. So if you're a looked after young person, so a person in care in the UK, you are legally obliged to be given advocacy, an advocacy service. So that is an independent person who comes in and speaks up for your rights. So that's rights to do with anything with your life, if you're looked after. So from your day-to-day life in your setting wherever you're living, to your relationships with your carers, to what you're going to do when you leave care, to money, to contact with your parents, to a whole range of things which are which you have a right to express and to have listened to. And that project that Recast was developing was trying to look at, and is still trying to look at, and understand how the kind of various different ways of being creative might provide the channel through which more complicated emotions and thoughts and feelings can be understood and interpreted, and that's particularly considering young people often in those situations who are not able to express themselves clearly for whatever reason. And so the HomeSounds project was a kind of a way of offering something to the care settings and saying, we'll come and do this, and as a way of introducing the care homes and the young people to what listening, the capacity to listen, can provide, because it provides both a platform for them, but it's also a platform for their carers or the people that look after them to have to be given to have the time to listen to them. So it's sort of trying to provide in what can be quite a hectic and very unstable and uncertain place for them. So that's so yeah. So that was the intention of HomeSounds, was to have something to offer. And as the project's developed, it's kind of you know, its core kind of messages about listening seem to have resonated across all kinds of ages and interests, and obviously the well-being side of it is a one of the key interests there. It's an obvious, it seems completely obvious that you might go and spend some time in the woods, hang out, be quiet yourself, and listen. And that was one of the kind of important themes that we were trying to get across to some of the young people, which was about the capacity of listening to help them be quiet, and for them to understand how to be in a space, in a quiet space with other people, where the potential is there for them to be heard, because there is not a whole load of complicated human communication going on around them. And I was talking about kind of sensory gating and selective hearing. Basically, you pick out the stuff that resonates, and that, for me, that's a particularly interesting area, is how we are defined by our acoustic environments, both in the kind of conscious present, but also historically and in our lives, but also in our environments more generally. I think from an educational point of view, it's something that is, it's never really thought about, actively thought about. People say, oh, this is a nice environment to have a lesson, or this is a nice place to spend some time, but no one will actively say, well, part of that might be down in any consistent and continuous way, saying this is an important element of this young person's life, and it has so many knock-on effects in terms of if your hearing can define your sense of space, your sense of perspective, your sense of danger and threat, your ability to communicate with others, the list of how it influences one's life is enormous. But it's the kind of thing, because it's always on, if you're lucky enough, your hearing is, and of course everyone hears, and you don't just hear through your ears, vibration, bone conduction, all kinds of different ways that your body is hearing. So the fact that it's not considered, and from my own point of view, my own perspective, I was heavily trained as a classical musician in a sort of hothouse way, and kind of the discovery of the world of environmental sound over the last few years has been a complete revelation, in terms of how did I manage to go through such an acute kind of training in music with this never being on the agenda in any meaningful way, when it's completely and utterly foundational. It's the impact, for me, the impact is too broad. It's impossible to express how broad the impact of our kind of sound environments are on us. We don't really understand it. There's a level of instinct to it, which is we're not fully in control of it. You can't. It's borderless. The way sound reaches you is completely borderless. You can be attacked in the street by a sort of assaulted in the street by an engine revving right next to your ear, which is essentially a physical assault. And yet these kinds of things are not, in my experience of working in education for 20 years, it's not something that's really considered in any serious way, or serious enough to do anything about it way. And obviously there are lots of different reasons why that's the case, and some of them are it's not some kind of necessarily an active thing, but a kind of active discrimination. Is just, this is where we're at. In terms of the HomeSounds project, our experience of doing it over the last couple of years with the young people, we've been sort of trialing it, and then, as I say, we've been running sound walks and installing these microphones, these live streams, and then we would do regular listening sessions with the kids. To give an example, on one of our projects, we started every session with an element of listening. So either a pre-recorded environmental soundscape or a live one, and not just kind of necessarily natural, soundscapes, but just soundscapes. But we lent towards natural soundscapes, and for lots of reasons to do with well-being. So we would have kids come, and they would sit and maybe want to listen for about 30 seconds, 45 seconds, something like that, before it all kind of kicks off. But then through sustained kind of exposure to that, and not necessarily always active being the case, we just have a stream on in the background when the kids come in, and it presents a space, these particular, and obviously we were working mostly with natural sort of soundscapes environments. It was providing a space where the kids began to feel more comfortable. We wouldn't be, we weren't on them as adults trying to get them to stop or sit down or listen or anything like that. It was just the sound itself kind of gave that to them. And so over the course of the project, we, the time that they were able to listen kind of increased, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, 20, half an hour, till we were getting to the point where they would, come and sit with us for an hour, not speaking, but listening. And then they might do other stuff while they're with us, draw, write, but very little conversation, if any. And it was completely eye-opening, in that we didn't really need to do anything. Just put the sounds on, and provide a supportive space, not interrupt, not hassle, or try and get them to do some kind of worthy educational activity, but just get them to listen. And eventually got to the point where that was what they wanted when they came. They would kind of look for that. And when we would take them out on the sound walks, the kind of effect was magnified. Walking and experiencing a whole soundscape. It was often, I mean, of course, none of this was happened all the time. It wasn't all kind of some sort of perfect listening world. It wasn't like that. But the general sense was the it's instinctively understood, even when we did it with little kids, particularly with the little kids, the 6, 7, 8-year-olds. We would go on 45-minute sound walks with them happily sitting for sort of 10, 15 minutes, sitting and listening. We would use mics to kind of to get them excited as much as anything else in the gadgetry and whatnot. And for me, that the kind of experience with the kids was, my own experience of doing this, and I've spent a lot of time sound walking and extended listening, and developing my ability to sit quietly with myself, my enthusiasm for it has just grown exponentially the more I've done it. speaking personally. As Oliver said, there's enormous amounts of, if you want to look at the academic research into health and well-being in terms of, just look at the nature stuff. It's not very complicated. It sort of seems like a revelation, but it's not at all. You have to do it.
Sorry to interrupt there, Martin, but that kind of ties in nicely with the question we've had from Claire Allerton about are there examples in health education or artistic practice of deep listening in urban settings, or is it always tied to the notion of a return to nature? And I think that's an interesting question.
Yeah, it is.
There's a link in the classroom for further reading. There's a big study that was done in Portugal, a series of commissions and research papers called Invisible Places, and its subtitle is Sound, Urbanism and a Sense of Place. And there's lots of writing and examples of the kind of things that we're talking about, but in urban environments.
Yeah.
And some of it is looking at pockets of nature and green spaces within urban environments, and some of it is just typically, looking at living in streets and tower blocks and things like that. And I think the same sort of thing can be done and achieved in an urban environment. I don't know if you've got any experience of doing it not in the countryside, Martin.
Yeah, we have. We would take the kids out. We did some sound walks in the city in Norwich during a time, especially over Christmas, was a great time to do it. And they particularly like playing games where we would use live streams, and a couple of them would go off and try and be somewhere in the city, and then we would tune into them. They were live streaming from phones. We would try get the other kids to listen to them and try and work out where they were by the sounds of their environment, by the sounds of the setting. It's not. I think we've gravitated towards. There are many reasons why we've gravitated towards the kind of more natural environment side of things, but it's not a kind of active trying to not engage with the urban spaces at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I feel like I've talked quite a lot. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but from a kind of one of the important things, we were saying about with the kids, and as with anybody really, it's about connection with where you are, and trying to understand and try to gain some control or some understanding of how you are being influenced by the space around you. I think that's massively important. It's so easy to be a kind of receiver, just a listener. And I don't think the listening that I'm sort of working on or proposing is not just sitting there and listening. You're actively involved, and it makes you consider the sounds that you make and are contributing to your environment. Yeah.
Cool.
And just to say, the strange times that they are now, there's even more opportunity, reason, motivation to do it now. I encourage anybody to take the opportunity.
Yeah, we've so this evening we've been focusing on sounds from around Norfolk, RSPB Titchwell, but if you go to locussonus.org to the sound map, you'll be able to access streams from around the world. And
yes, they have some fabulous streams on there.
Yeah,
a stream from a humpback whale pod in Hawaii, a little mobile mic that's taken out into the sea, dropped down amongst the pod while they're mating calls. It's an amazing stream. Streams from India, Japan, South Korea, and particularly I should mention on the 3rd to the 5th of May, it's International Dawn Chorus Weekend, but they run an event called Reveille, which is broadcast on Resonance Extra, and it's a a 24-hour tracking of the dawn chorus as the sun rises around the world, jumping from mic to mic. It's a great thing to tune into.
So the only thing that I was going to ask you, Martin, in terms of the kind of future of HomeSounds, and having just recently joined the organisation, is the kind of what. Obviously, this is still a relatively niche thing that, in terms of activity and its understanding.
Yep.
And I wondered how we go about kind of dealing with that. How we get it into kind of more of a common practice, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's uphill all the way, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a kind of like, dispiriting sense. I think it's just the reality. There's so many different factors, but involved. I mean, I think we're going to start a kind of program called Life Lessons, which is kind of to encourage schools just to spend like a few minutes a day, maybe at the beginning of a lesson, maybe at the beginning of a assembly or something like that, sitting quietly, which is enormously difficult for a school to do, you can imagine. But even any efforts in that direction, even if it lasts 5-10 seconds, it's a start.
Yeah, I think we also had a conversation a while ago about it being equating it to kind of the popularity of community music, when in the 60s that was a very abstract concept and thing for people to understand, for funders to understand. I think is also another crucial part of what we're trying to do. Is getting people to kind of support the work and paying for it. So hopefully we're just at the beginning of a similar sort of journey where listening as an active practice will become more popular and more kind of widely used.
Yeah, it's great. It doesn't really involve much.
No, yeah, it's relatively straightforward and free. Yeah,
it doesn't. I think we're coming up to 9 o'clock, so that might be a good time to finish, I think.
Cool.
But thank you everyone who's listened and stayed with us. And thanks to Oliver for being involved tonight, and again to Henry for putting us on. It was lovely to be here. I think we said we were going to open a conversation space. We'll put links to that afterwards if anybody wants to find out more. But if not, I hope you've enjoyed it and take some time to listen to the streams.
And to add that the music I made is also recorded, so we'll find a place to put that if anyone missed that as well, in case you're interested in listening to that again.
Great, lovely. Thanks.
Cool.
Oliver. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Hello. There's a slight delay, so just checking that it's all caught up. I've posted a link to the sound map in the comments, so if you want to check more on that, you're welcome to. Just making sure I'm definitely coming through. Yep. Okay. Thank you for Martin and Oliver for that discussion. Really interested and listening and talking more about how we listen. The link to the Google Hangout, I'm sure one of them will post in the discussion now. And the password, the code for the classroom that you'd need. And there's a couple of questions on there if you're interested in answering more. I'm sure they'd be delighted to hear from you. A quick message about what's coming up next on the Assembly Online programme. Next Thursday, April the 23rd, we have a critical reading discussion with Philippa Snow and Rose Hyams-Dayton. They'll be reading from Discussing Heroines by Kate Sembreno, which is a manifesto for toxic girls that reclaims the wives and mistresses of modernism for literature and feminism. If you would like to read a copy of that, there is one available on a link on our website, on Assembly Online. I can post a link to in the chat, or it's just on the Assembly House Trust website. Audience members will be able to post questions to Rose and Philippa during that as well. So if you read the text before and have anything you'd like to say, do post it in the chat. And the following week, Thursday, April 30th, we have a poetry live event hosted by Kai Draper with 4 guests to be confirmed, but hopefully including people from New Zealand, Ethiopia, Edinburgh, London and Norwich, which should be really exciting. Make sure you're on the mailing list to hear from the weekly update that comes out on Monday. Thank you to Michael Kelly on the design, and for Assembly House Trust for the support, and once again for Oliver and Martin. I'm going to turn it off now, but cheers for your time, and hopefully see you next week. Thank you.